The tropics easing up a bit after Hurricane Delta, although there are some areas of development that we're monitoring here in mid-October. We are live to answer your questions in a live Q&A coming up right here on Tracking the Tropics. Hey there, everybody. JB Buno here with you live once again. It is mid-October, getting a little bit closer to the end of the 2020 hurricane season, but we're not there just yet. Being joined by KXAN meteorologist David Yeomans there in the center of your screen. We're here to answer your questions and give you an up-to-the-minute forecast on what's going on in the tropics. As a reminder, use the hashtags that you have here on your screen. Hashtag Hey David, hashtag Hey JB, and of course, hashtag Hey Amanda for meteorologist Amanda Holly standing by at the wall with the very latest on a couple of areas that we are watching very, very closely here in mid-October. Hey there, Amanda.
Hey there, JB. Happy Wednesday to everyone as well. Thanks for joining us here on Tracking the Tropics. You know, we've had a couple of quiet days in the tropics since Hurricane Delta made landfall last Friday, but we are tracking one tropical wave here. This did come off the coast of Africa several days ago, and the National Hurricane Center has been monitoring as it moved across the central Atlantic. It's now just off the coast of the Lesser Antilles here, and you can see all of the shower and thunderstorm associated with it. We are still looking at a 10% chance of developing here over the next 2 days and over the next 5 days. So that chance has actually come down just over the past couple of days here. And I don't think that this one is going to get its act together just enough to become a named storm. Can't rule out a tropical depression here, but I think the biggest thing from this actual tropical wave, I believe they're calling it Invest 93L now, but I think it's just going to bring some moisture, some gusty winds to the northern Lesser Antilles Islands, the Virgin Islands, and then into Puerto Rico as we head into tonight and into Thursday and into Friday. Don't think that this one is going to be of concern, especially for us here in the United States. Now, it wouldn't be unusual for us to see more named storms as we head through the rest of October, even into November. The typical peak, of course, of hurricane season was back on September 10th. We're now into October here, but we do get another little peak on the activity scale here, historically speaking, as we get into the third week of October. That peak typically comes right around October 20th, and right on cue, we are going to be potentially tracking something developing in the Caribbean. Right now, this is a look at the future moisture here. This is the area of moisture that we're dealing with Invest 93L, that tropical wave. As you can see as I advance this, I don't think that this one's going to, again, get enough organized for us to be concerned. But then as we head into the weekend and into the beginning of next week, we're going to see a big area of some tropical moisture develop right there in the Western Caribbean. So this is a long ways out yet, and the National Hurricane Center has not highlighted this area for potential development just yet, but it is something that we're going to continue to watch. The GFS continues to kind of particularly develop this system. Much too early to say if it's going to develop, much too early to even say where it will be going. But if it does develop in that location, this is exactly where we look for development in this month, in October here, in the Western Caribbean, in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and then off the east coast of the United States. Conditions are just a little bit more favorable in this particular area for development as we head into October. Of course, we're already in the Greek alphabet here. We have had 4 letters checked off of the Greek alphabet. The last was Delta. That made landfall in Louisiana, the 4th named storm to make landfall in Louisiana, unfortunately, this year alone. And it did make landfall as a Category 2 storm, but at one point it was a Category 4 in the Caribbean. We've had 10 total landfalls so far of named storms. 5 of them were hurricanes, and Delta was the last hurricane to make landfall in the United States. And unfortunately, JB and David, this system, Delta, made landfall just under 20 miles to the east of where Hurricane Laura made landfall 6 weeks prior. So this is an area, again, that was particularly devastated by 2 hurricanes, and again, 2 more named storms made landfall along the eastern coast of Louisiana. So it's been a busy year. We are tired of tracking the tropics for sure, but of course we're going to continue to track the tropics as we head through the rest of October and November. But I'm going to toss it back to you, JB and David, because you, David, were actually in Hurricane Laura tracking that system.
Yeah, and we just lost Amanda there really briefly, but David, I want to get your perspective here. Look at this. This X tells a story, a pretty dramatic story. For those of you just joining us here, that was Hurricane Laura several weeks ago there on the left side of your screen. And then that's the pink line there, and then that yellow line there, Hurricane Delta. I mean, we're talking 20 miles apart from each other, making landfall there on the Louisiana coast. You're closer to that area than we are here. Just unbelievable that we had that close apart and in the same hurricane season.
Yeah, and like Laura said, or like Amanda said, pardon me, it's getting tiresome for those folks in Louisiana. We've had 10 landfalls in the U.S. of tropical storms or hurricanes. That's a new record for any hurricane season we've ever tracked. And we've had 4 of those in the small state of Louisiana. I mean, what are the odds of that? The sad thing about Laura was that it hit during peak intensity. It kept strengthening up to landfall. It was a 150-mile-per-hour storm. That's almost a Category 5 when it hit southwestern Louisiana. And then Delta, of course, did not hit at its strongest. Luckily, the cooler waters took their toll and some wind shear ripped the storm up a bit. But another Category 2 storm, 12 miles away, I even saw it from Laura's landfall. Just devastating for those folks. A lot of them did not have power for the 6 weeks between storms. And then talk about insult to injury. They're still trying to get their act together and start cleaning up from Laura. And then they get another Category 2 storm. So, we've seen a lot of groups from Texas, including some relief groups from Houston, just shipping on out there with a bunch of water and a bunch of food and trying to help those folks. You probably saw the images of the blue tarps where everybody's roofs used to be before the second storm even hit. A lot of people still did not have roofs from Hurricane Laura. So Delta, certainly a weaker storm as it hit last week. We had a meteorologist, Kristen Curry, in the thick of it there, but just in the worst place imaginable for rural Southwest Louisiana.
Yeah, and our Tracking the Tropics super fans out there will note, they remember, I'm sure, David being out there in Hurricane Laura. We were checking in with David with various moments there on the Louisiana coast as he was really in the thick of it. So really just invaluable to have him here again. David Yeomans joining us from KXAN in Austin, Texas. Meteorologist Amanda Holly here with you live in your hurricane headquarters. I'm JB Buno. Let's start to answer some of your questions here, everybody. We want to answer some questions as we are here not entirely through hurricane season, or really, as you saw the graph that Amanda had earlier, not through the worst of this just yet. We are certainly past the peak of hurricane season, but October storms are still certainly within the realm of possibility, and leave it to 2020 to produce something this late in the season or even into November. Again, the hurricane season lasts until the end of November. So we're going to start to answer some of your questions here in this live Q&A. Use the hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyAmanda, hashtag HeyDavid. We're going to be looking for those comments specifically here in the Facebook Live comment section. So if you use one of those hashtags, we'll throw them up on screen, kind of like Jackie Morena, hashtag HeyJB. Please tell me it won't head to the panhandle of Florida. And of course, this is talking about the area of development that Amanda Holly was just mentioning a moment ago. Way too early to pinpoint whether or not we even have any significant development from the system that would be heading our way. Right, Amanda? Yeah,
I do want to preface that by saying we are still more than a week away of potential development. And yes, models are showing the area of moisture kind of congregating there in the Western Caribbean. So we will continue to watch it. But it's, again, much too early to say that this will even continue to show up in the longer range forecast models. And it's much too early to say how strong it will be or where it will go. It was just something that I caught my eye as we head and we kind of look at those longer range 2.5 week forecast models to kind of give us an idea if there's any development out there. And sometimes they go away, sometimes they don't. So we'll continue to watch it. And we have some more questions that are coming in here. And again, this is a lot of people are asking questions about specific areas. Bobby Curtis, Shehorn here, hashtag JB. Are we going to have any more named storms in past Christian Mississippi? And we don't have a crystal ball that'll tell us what's going to happen here towards Halloween or towards Thanksgiving. These next 6 weeks of the 2020 hurricane season. But David, I'm sure a lot of folks there in coastal Louisiana, coastal Mississippi, even near Alabama and into the Florida Panhandle, these are areas that have been hit hard so far in 2020, and they don't want to see it continue.
Right. And I think, Amanda showed this map well. I'm glad you pulled it up here, JB. The later we get in the season, October, especially the end of October into November, storms like to form in the Caribbean Sea, but they don't like to come northwest because we start to have cold fronts sweeping through Texas and sweeping through Louisiana and Mississippi. We have a more progressive pattern and a more progressive jet stream with storms that get swooped up to the north and east as those arrows show, instead of drifting into Texas like they often do earlier and mid in the season. So I think, I'm pretty confident saying that Texas is in the clear for the rest of the season. Fingers crossed Louisiana and Mississippi will be as well. But that disturbance mid-late next week, day 8, day 9, it is notable, as Amanda said, the GFS has been developing it for a few days. The European, which has not always been on board this hurricane season at all, has also been developing it now for a couple of consistent days. So something to watch. You know, the Caribbean Sea, it still has a lot of heat content in it, even though the Gulf of Mexico is starting to cool off from all the cooler weather we're seeing. And this kind of reminds me of Wilma. It was even later in October when Wilma exploded east of the Yucatan Peninsula, and then it took kind of a similar forecast track to what this one potentially might take. Now, obviously, as you guys said, it's way too soon to talk about Florida impacts or no U.S. impacts whatsoever. But I talk about Wilma because it is possible, as you guys know, to get really intense hurricanes. That was a 185 mile per hour Category 5 in late October down in that area.
Yeah, we have those really warm sea surface temperatures in the eastern Gulf of Mexico there, right off the coast of Florida. And then you can see how really warm they are in the western Caribbean as well. 85 degrees just south of Cuba. That's plenty warm enough for that tropical development. And you can see the really warm waters off the coast, the east coast of Florida as well. That's the Gulf Stream that heads up to the north. And we've actually seen storms kind of, even though it's a thin sliver of some very warm water there, we've seen storms intensify if the center kind of moves over that thin strip of warm water. So this is why we kind of look toward closer to home in October here for development, because those waters stay warm enough and the upper level winds are a bit more conducive for that development.
We're getting a lot of really... David, you want to hop in here? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, just one more thing. That area of 84, 85s, as Amanda was showing south of Cuba, that's right where Hurricane Delta exploded with one of the fastest rapid intensifications we've ever seen. So if this storm does get its act together over there, that's a really dangerous spot in October.
We have a lot of actually some great questions that are coming in here. Again, use the hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyAmanda, or hashtag HeyDavid. Really use hashtag HeyAmanda or hashtag HeyDavid. They're the experts here on stream. We are using those hashtags so that we can answer your questions directly from Facebook Live. And a couple of really great ones here that I'm going to get both of your perspectives on. Fiona Rockwell joining us, hashtag HeyDavid. Do you use drones to collect data or specifically satellite tracking data? And I think what Fiona is asking here, and I'll throw you guys both up here on screen in just a moment, but asking specifically about how we acquire the data that we're showing here on Tracking the Tropics and how the National Hurricane Center more specifically acquires the data that we use to track tropical development.
Sure, that's a great question, Fiona Rockwell. Thank you for watching and for asking with the Hey David. We do not use any airborne drones that are too light to be tossed around by the storm. We use a lot of satellite analysis, which we have access to through NOAA and through the National Hurricane Center. We also use the airplanes, of course, the Hurricane Hunter aircraft that only go out there when a storm is really getting its act together, not always just for every area of low pressure. But there are actually some ocean drones that are lesser used and lesser known that kind of just float around in the top 300 meters of the ocean and radio back all kinds of information to our best computer models about heat content and about currents, and some things like that, Amanda, can be useful for our models as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about our forecast models, we talk about data being input into those models, right? And over the United States, over the land, we have balloons that get launched twice a day across the entire country. But over the Atlantic and the central Atlantic specifically, we don't have those as many data points to kind of be input into our forecast models. So the sensors that we have out there, ships that are out there in the shipping channels, those are really helpful for wind speeds and sometimes sea surface temperatures. But a lot of the data that we do get, especially for the central Atlantic, when we're not talking about a specific storm, does come from satellites. So the picture that you're looking at right now is an infrared satellite imagery. So it kind of measures the heat content, and those reds that you see there, those are some really cold cloud tops indicating some taller thunderstorms. And that's what it helps. Our degrees help us kind of analyze that data, and the satellites kind of help to put it on the screen.
We have another great question.
And I think it's fascinating, Amanda, how precise these satellites are. People think of a satellite thousands of miles out in space. How much can that know? But it can detect millimeters of height on the sea surface. It can detect the change that's so tiny. It can sense the temperature of the sea surface. So it can really do a lot from out of space. And
we've gotten some great updates, especially with GOES 16 and GOES 17, with minute by minute updates. They're really invaluable.
The next question coming in, Erika Handy. I love this question. Hashtag HeyJB. Do you think the start of hurricane season will eventually move to May, since more storms have been forming before June lately? Erika, of course, referencing the official start of hurricane season, which is June 1st. So, Amanda, any chance that there could be a shift in the start date of hurricane season?
I suppose it's possible, Erika. Actually, the Pacific season starts on May 15th because those storms do typically tend to form a little bit earlier out in the Pacific. Now, we have had storms form, I believe, every year for the past 5 years in May before that June 1st start date. Before that, it was about every other year that we would have a storm form before that start date. So I don't believe the National Hurricane Center is talking about that anytime soon. But I guess if we see more active storms continue to form, heading into the next 10 years, maybe they would consider it. But not sure. That's a great question.
Erika joining us from WKRG's Facebook page there in Mobile, Alabama. Thanks a lot to Erika for the question. And we also have from KXAN's Facebook page there in Austin, Texas, where David Yeomans is. We have this question coming in with #HeyDavid from Victoria Jeffers. #HeyDavid. When does hurricane season end again? What are the chances of a development? I just got on. Great question.
Hey, Victoria. Never too late to hop on. Thanks for watching. Hurricane season ends officially in the Atlantic on November 30th. That's not a hard and fast date. But as you can see, the activity kind of peaks in September. It has a secondary peak here in the second or third week of October, and then it ramps down through the year after that. Now, is November 30th a hard and fast date? No. The previous season of record, which we are outpacing by 5 storms to today's date, is 2005. And in 2005, we actually saw the last storm form in late December, which I believe is Tropical Storm Zeta. So things can happen before the season starts. They can happen after the season ends. Hopefully, we won't get any rogue storms after the season's end, and certainly none that should impact the U.S. But yeah, absolutely something to watch. Now, as far as what we're watching right now, in the next 2-3 days, there's not much going on. The disturbance out near the Lesser Antilles has only a tiny 10% chance of development. This is down from 30% a day or two ago, so we're not too worried about that. But what Amanda was showing us a couple minutes ago is that there's a second area of low pressure which is going to form 7 or 8 days from now. So it's, in the distant future, and a lot can change. But you'll see that big clump of green here on the map getting its act together in the southern Caribbean Sea. And then this is mid and late next week. There's that big green swirl that might be somewhere near Cuba. We can see powerful October hurricanes getting their act together in that area. If they do form, very unlikely heading to Texas, but it could threaten Florida or somewhere in the southeast.
Our featured meteorologist today being, of course, David Yeomans from KXAN in Austin, Texas. David, before we end out our show here on Tracking the Tropics, the floor is yours. What do you anticipate between now and the end of really the 2020 hurricane season, and just your thoughts on how 2020 has been thus far?
I mean, what a storm. To have Laura and Delta both hitting the state of Louisiana as 2 of 4 storms to hit Louisiana, to have Laura be a tie for the 5th strongest storm to ever hit the U.S. on record. And not only that, but to have 2 storms making landfall in Texas. Hurricane Hannah caused a few $100 million in damage as just a strong Category 1 storm. And then, of course, SIES and several other storms hitting the U.S. Going forward, guys, I was looking back at 2005 because that's really the only season that can compare in any way to this. And as I said, to today's date, we're 5 storms ahead of 2005, and we ended that season with 27 storms. After today's date, in 2005, we still had 7 more tropical storms and hurricanes form. On average, we only get 2 more named storms between now and the end of the season. I don't think we'll get 7 more, but I think it's possible we get somewhere in the middle, maybe 4 or 5 more named storms. That could put us at theta in the Greek alphabet. As far as landfall threats to the U.S., I'm really hoping that next one, 8-9 days out from now in the Caribbean Sea that we were just talking about, that could be the last major threat to the U.S. But always, best to approach this with caution. Some of those November storms, guys, in my experience, they just kind of wander around as fish storms, and hopefully we can keep them as that.
More fish storms and less landfalls would be ideal here to end out 2020. It has been a very, very busy 2020 hurricane season, as, of course, we've been here with you every step of the way on Tracking the Tropics through the power of really tapping into all of the meteorologists that we have join us from across the country, including KXAN's David Yeomans, who, again, was in the thick of Hurricane Laura not too long ago. And we appreciate David joining us here from home here on the program. And, of course, Amanda Holly for the very latest in the National Hurricane Center, joining us here from your hurricane headquarters. I'm JB Buno. Thanks so much for being here with us. To all of the questions that we didn't get to, we'll try to get to as many as we can next time. Tracking the Tropics streams Wednesdays, 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central, right here on this app, website, or social media platform. We'll be here every Wednesday throughout the remainder of the 2020 hurricane season. Again, that going until the end of November. For David, Amanda, I'm JB. Thanks so much for joining us here, and we'll see you next time on Tracking the Tropics.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.